So Exiger is a full stack risk management and visibility platform. So I like to say we go all the way from labor practices down to the periodic table, right? So that's parts, raw materials, and sanctioned entities, all of it. And part of that stack is industrial and OT. And when we have very high assurance customers, like could be a federal agency or could be a big company that needs to prove that the systems are trustworthy, and we need to make OT part of that for the trust but verifier for regulations. We love aDolus's capability to fill that gap, right? We have software bill of materials, we can monitor the software bill of materials, but if someone doesn't have an SBOM, and if they have legacy systems, which is very common, then we need a capability that can come in and generate that, unpack all of those files, and attribute them to their ultimate suppliers, even if it's been rebranded along the way. And aDolus does this with a very high level of fidelity, right? So the data has precision, it's accurate, and it doesn't mean a lot of hours disqualifying false positives. And that's super important for our customers because our customers are understaffed for these supply chain risk management functions, and they're very security sensitive. So getting the OT data and with all its historical fidelity and the AI that aDolus has to combine with the AI that Exiger has for suppliers and entity level intelligence, that's amazing. So aDolus will unpack a file and there'll be 19 components on an SBOM, and they'll say we have 56 suppliers, right, in the transitive dependencies. And Exiger, using its entity level intelligence, can analyze the risk in all of those suppliers. So if it's, for instance, a state-owned company in an adversarial nation that actually owns that supplier, we can supply that to our customer, and it's very business relevant.
So a lot of these systems, as everybody knows in OT, are legacy systems. There are no SBOMs for them. There's very, very little data for them. So we can dig in and get that information about, where did those components come from? How old are they? What are their risks? And then feed that into Exiger, who really have all that intelligence to be able to dig in and say, look at this component, look at this open source project that was used in this product. And by the way, that open source project hasn't been updated in a decade, or it has the following contributors that are very high risk actors. So there's so much ability to be able to use that to not just look at what's going on today, but to look at the entire legacy fleet a company has and understand the risk. And that's just best done by sharing the dig in that we can do into the actual software with all that intelligence that they can provide about who are the creators and the origins of these software packages.
And even in the components that are proprietary, most of the computer scientists who come to a conference like S4, they're not necessarily thinking about mergers and acquisitions as an attack vector, but in fact what we see in our observation and our monitoring the supply chain is that mergers and acquisitions is absolutely an attack vector. And so when you have a component that is suddenly from a company that's suddenly acquired by an adversarial nation state affiliate, which we can monitor on the entity level, then you absolutely do need to be aware and preemptively take action perhaps to remediate the risk in this component, because now you have an adversarial actor with very intimate knowledge of that component and how to exploit it. So the regulations have arrived ahead of the actual technical capability or data assets in some cases to satisfy the regulations. And this is where we have such an amazing partnership, because what we can do with aDolus is to actually provide that transparency retroactively, right? That's the holy grail, is I can't get SBOMs from my providers because they don't know what they even have. Right? It's not because they're bad. It's they didn't design these systems with the idea of producing software bills of materials. if all we have is binaries for firmware that we can pull off a device, how do we get to the regulatory requirement, which is now there, for systems that were not designed with this regulatory requirement in mind? And this is a very urgent type of business case. There are a lot of companies that need to do this now, and they just don't have a lot of good solutions. And the combination of our capabilities and our ability to deliver all kinds of third-party risk with the retroactive analysis of aDolus to understand what the supplier mix is will satisfy not only our corporate customers, our federal industrial base, as well as the 40 federal agencies that are Exiger's customers.
And I can give you a real example of this. So we were asked a little while ago to look into a pipeline, Midwestern pipeline, that had a lot of assets that were 5, 10, 15 years old. RTUs, for everybody in the room that knows what those are, controlling that pipeline. And what we found that was really interesting as we started to dig into these devices is they had a lot of components and a lot of support for components from sanctioned entities that were not supposed to be running a pipeline. These were products from entities, I won't say who, that are specifically not allowed in U.S. critical infrastructure. So, we're not, there was no point going to the vendor and saying, give me a list of your SBOMs, because quite frankly, this is 10-year-old gear, but it's very high-risk gear. And the company that was doing the acquisition, the pipeline that was doing the acquisition, was able to use this information really to make intelligent risk decisions about what exactly they were buying and the risks they were buying along with the assets.
So if you think about the end user, right, so we have some very, very mission-sensitive end users. Some of them are like the Defense Department, for instance, and they have actually even devised with Exiger kind of an assured product playbook. So you have a lot of suppliers of critical infrastructure, and these are not weapon systems. These are the pieces of infrastructure that you need, right, to run, for instance, a military base. And there is some foreign ownership and control concern with certain of these suppliers, but they've stepped forward and they've demonstrated that they are willing to be more transparent. And the Defense Department is actively working and engaging with these suppliers who are willing to be more transparent. And the use of the aDolus platform is part of this process whereby a supplier can say, yeah, we know, we've done business in China, we have suppliers in different areas, but we're willing to provide our high assurance customers with complete transparency using these tactics and techniques and technologies. And they're given a lot of credit for that because a lot of the big customers, they want to work with suppliers who are willing to do what it takes to demonstrate that they can be trusted. And this is a huge potential opportunity for both of our companies.
Yeah, this is really about transparency, bringing transparency to the industry. And we've all got skeletons in the closet and problems from the past in the decisions and the partners we made, et cetera, into the industry. But it's really about bringing that forward and saying, here's the risks, and then being able to make decisions on how you're going to mitigate them or take them on or deal with them. And it really is having that visibility into the components, the products, the suppliers of those products, the third parties, the fourth parties, the open source systems. Only when you know what you're actually getting in the soup are you able to provide really good risk analysis and mitigation.
And then the customers, I think, want to mitigate this fear from the suppliers, right? Because every supplier, when they provide transparency, they're afraid, is this going to be what gets used to nail me?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that the good news is that there are very mature customers who know that they have a lot of legacy stuff, who are willing to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And it's only when you have this type of data that customers and suppliers can kind of meet each other where they are. And that's ultimately our only way through this, because we all have to live in the real world where things have economic consequences.
Yeah.
Thank you both. And if you're in the audience and you're watching this and you have questions, you're in Miami, come see aDolus booth. Both folks are in there. Also, you can post them right there and we'll get Eric and JC to answer the question.